Welcome to the Develop Yourself podcast, where we teach you everything you need to land your first job as a software developer by learning to develop yourself, your skills, your network, and more. I'm Brian, your host. Today we have David Rogers, former teacher turned software engineer turned teacher. Big plot twist, right? We're going to deep dive into how David got into software, how he teaches others, how to avoid the mistakes most people make when switching careers, and about his origin story. And I actually met you from Instagram. I was scrolling through Instagram, seeing all the pictures of dudes in coffee shops and hot young ladies coding at their laptops. And I thought, this is, useless. And then I see you really breaking down and teaching difficult concepts, giving really actionable and useful advice. I thought, wow, this is great. This is exactly what more people need to see on their timeline in general on social media if they're looking to get into code. So first of all, thanks for stopping by and welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, and thanks for that intro. I appreciate it.
Totally mean it, man. You're a very much needed in a social media landscape that tends to trivialize or oversimplify the process of going from barista or teacher or whatever into software, which leads me to, how did you learn to code and what made you want to switch careers?
Yeah. So what made me want to switch careers was I was teaching abroad in China and South Korea for a total of 8 years, around 8 years. And I came back to the States and I started teaching as well in the States. But it's a different ball game, you know. They're much nicer to teachers in Asia than they are here. Teachers, you're blamed for everything for the most part, from your supervisors and from the parents and from the students. Everything is your fault. And plus, you don't get paid that much. You know, I had to do DoorDash, Uber Eats just to supplement my income to be able to get by.
Well, as a full-time teacher, you're also doing side quests and hustles.
Yeah, doing side missions.
Wow.
On the weekends, mostly it was on the weekends, and definitely over the summer. And I'm someone who financially plans pretty well, but at the same time, there's only so much you can actually make, right? Teaching. So I just basically asked myself, hey, is this what you want to continue to do for the next 10, 20 years of your life? And that answer was no. I have to start somewhere. Why not now? When I lived in Korea, I was a little bit interested in coding because Korea is I think it's the number one technological advanced country in the world or something like that.
Oh, wow.
It's just past Japan a few years ago. Technology is everywhere, right? And so I was like, oh, maybe I could get into this Python thing. I don't know anything about it. I heard Python is where you should study and what you should learn. So on one bus ride, I had my little MacBook. I opened up Python. I had PyCharm, and I had no idea what I was doing. That end of the bus ride, I was like, code is not for me. But
was this a long bus ride or a short bus ride?
It was pretty short. I actually got off and sat on the bench for a while. I was like, let me try to, I was like, no, this is not it. So fast forward back to being in America and going through all of that experience that I mentioned earlier, I was like, okay, well, how am I going to learn how to code? So I found out about Udemy, and I bought a course on Udemy. It was $15 or $17, like Angela Yu. And I tried out that course, and next thing you know, I had an HTML site up like that, and I was like, what? That's it? That's coding? No, obviously, there's way more to it. But at that point, it was like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. Opened up my eyes to so many things. And I just started going through that course. It said full web development boot camp and all that stuff.
Yep.
So it's going to teach me everything I need to know, and I'm going to get a job from this. So I was locked in. And I just always think of it what are my best students? What do they do? Because I wasn't really a great student. What do my best students do as a teacher? What did my best students do? And then I just emulated what they did.
Oh, that's interesting. So you're thinking about literally the people that you're teaching, and you're thinking, okay, what are they? And you're mimicking their habits. That's really interesting.
I learned from my students how to be a good student. It's crazy. I did not do homework. I did not do a lot of stuff as a student. I tested well. I would do classwork well, but homework, I just never did it.
what was your process to learn? Did you learn everything through Udemy and online courses?
I did end up taking like a course, like a prep course for a boot camp. I took a like a 2 week prep course. That helped a lot in terms of my understanding of JavaScript. But then it also helped me realize that I'm not that far off and I don't need to go to a boot camp. And so I need to
Wow.
just continue to do what I'm doing. It wasn't just through like the online courses, because I think a lot of people do go that route and they build those projects and they kind of get stuck in the tutorial hell. But for me, it was like, hey, I need to build something with this. And so I started building other things. And when I was talking to boot camps, they were like, hey, build this project. They give me a list of projects to build.
Mhm.
And they said, like, hey, we want you to build it 100% on your own. Don't follow any tutorials. Don't do any of this stuff. And so for me, that was a huge, like, whoa, can I do this? And, I built a blackjack game all by myself, not looking for any online help. It was just like the algorithms, like how to make the deck shuffle the proper way
Right.
and stuff like that. It's just like math things that, all right, once I get the algorithm, how do I incorporate it within my project? And I started just building project. That was my first one. I just started building projects like that. And then next thing you know, I got into React and I started building projects again, similarly using that logic. Like I'm going to research every single step of the way.
Briefly, what was your learning process like? Like, how do you go from like, okay, I don't know JavaScript, I don't know React. How did you acquire that knowledge and then practically apply it like that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So first acquired it through the Udemy course, like just syntax, right? Syntax. And there was a little bit of free code camp involved in that. And then in terms of like applying it, I would just do a lot of their challenges. But it wasn't until I started being around other like aspiring developers that were thinking about going to boot camps that kind of opened my eyes to, there's more to it, because I built like small business websites for my mom and some friends, HTML, CSS, like very static, basic sites. But when I was with the other aspiring developers, they haven't even done that. They're just focused on data structures, algorithms. And I was just like, I was bad at that, but I could actually build things. So then it was just like, oh, okay, like I can learn data structures and
For
algorithms.
sure.
Of course, it's hard, but it's just discipline more than anything else. And I already am building projects. So I just continued to do that path. And it just led to me like going to a few different meetups, and I met like professional developers, people who were getting paid. They were like, hey, you built that? I went to like a few showcases. I
Mhm.
showed what I built. They were like, you built that? I said, yeah. They were like, that's better than when I first got my job. You should start
Yeah.
applying. And I was like, really? They were like, seriously, like start applying. I was like, oh, I don't think I'm ready, but I did it anyway. And next thing you know, about a month later, I had like 2 job offers. And so,
That's really funny. I had a similar story, but I did go to a boot camp and I actually knew basically all the material. But the one thing they really did for me was encourage me to apply. And they did fill in a few gaps that I'd been missing, which I found really helpful. But I got hired like really quickly afterwards too. This is about 10 years ago. When did you get your first role?
I don't know. I don't remember the year. I think it was about 3 years ago. So what year would that be? 21?
That's amazing because I think there's a narrative out there for sure that I've been hearing for 10 years now that the market's oversaturated.
Oh
It
yeah.
takes a year to get a job and no one's hiring. And I'm like, yeah, I do understand the market is tough. And I do understand that for everybody, every person like you or me that may have gotten a job like within a month, I know that's not typical. I also know that like, yeah, people obviously are getting hired. Like it's insane to me that people think that there's like some major drop off in tech. It's really interesting to me because I think about all the other careers out there that are growing at like a snail's pace compared to tech, which is growing at this wild pace.
Yeah.
And
Like tripling
we got
other. Yeah.
tricked in the pandemic to thinking that, this hiring spree would last forever. Now it's kind of just going back to normal. But anyway, that is amazing. So you self-taught, didn't go to boot camp, landed a role. What was that process like for interviewing and applying from basically zero? How'd you do that?
It was so painful.
Yeah.
It was so painful. But I believe mindset is really important. And being a teacher, I always had to teach my students, like, hey, I taught history. So they'll say, like, I'm really bad at history. I'm like, well, that just means you're bad at remembering like what you did. Like, what did you eat for breakfast? And they'll be like, oh, I ate so and so. I was like, well, you're not bad at history. Right. So it's just really about your mindset and how you choose to apply it. And so for me, going into it. It's like, all right, well, I've been on a whole bunch of interviews before.
Hmm.
My personality, I know my strengths and my weaknesses, right? My personality is probably one of my strengths, and my communication skills is probably also another strength for me. The weakness would be the lack of experience. And so how can I like gloss over it,
For
or like
sure.
how can I make it look nice, right? And
Hmm.
so there was a lot of failure, honestly. The first couple of interviews I was asked to code. How would I code an elevator?
The dumb
And I
question,
was just
but
like, what? Like, I literally asked him, I said, this is a web developer position for a front end, right? And he was like, yeah, but how would you like code a elevator?
I'm glad you asked him that question. And I understand everybody, no one knows what they're doing in interviews. I thought I had the interview down correctly. I'm like, I'm going to ask this question. Then I realized later that was stupid. Why'd I ask that question? It gets me no closer to understanding whether or not you are going to be a workable, hireable developer or not. It lets me know if you know some ridiculous question that I think is important. And I think we get caught up in that. But you went through that experience like we all did. And then,
Yeah, of
so you
course.
failed a few. And then, like, how'd you land that first one?
Shifted my mindset,
Okay.
honestly. Like, so it went from like, kind of give me an opportunity, please give me an opportunity. I'm like, I'm gonna try hard. I'm gonna do like the best that I can do. Like,
Yeah.
believe in me. But nobody wants to really hire that type of person because like we're talking about close to six figures. We're talking a lot of money on the line, and not to mention just money, but their product. This is what customers is going to be in customers' hand. This is something that's actually really serious. So you should hire somebody that is already running, not like crawling and needs to like start walking. And or if you're in a war, you want a trained soldier to go on the battlefield, not somebody that's like, oh, throwing grenades backwards, right? Like, like, oh, what do I do now? You don't want that type of person.
I
Like,
like
give
that
me a
analogy.
chance.
Yeah, I totally feel you on that one. I think that's like a hard fact that people may not want to hear, but the reality is like no one really wants to take a chance on you. No one wants to do that. Interesting. You said you changed your mindset. And like, so how'd you present yourself with that kind of mindset? Like, hey, I'm an asset here.
Yeah, I started looking at what I actually did do with the skills that I developed and the websites that I did build, the people that I did help. And then also, I figured that there was not much difference between what I'm coding and then what I would be coding. I just started having confidence. I just told myself, like, hey, you are a developer, you are a software engineer. You can do this. You have done it already. I built a really big project. I was going to release it as an actual business. Like it was like full fledged, like almost completely done. It was like 90% done. And they asked for sample code. I
Hmm.
showed them sample code from that project and they were actually impressed by it. And they kept inviting me to the interview. So for me, it was like, all right, if you're keep inviting me to the interview, I had 5 rounds of interviews. So if you are wanting to meet me 5 times, like I already know, like in my mind, like I'm like one of two, maybe one of three that you're really considering. And so at this point, it's not just take a chance on me. I need to show you that I know what I'm doing and I'm very confident that I can do it. And if not, I can figure out a way to be able to do it. It's just at the end of the day, like we all have Google, right? And I'll be able to figure it out. I'll be determined to do it. I had that mindset, and with all of my other skill sets with that mindset, it came through very powerfully for both of the job offers that I ended up getting, even though I wasn't probably the most technically knowledgeable or experienced person.
I like what you said a lot there. I think people think mindset is being like fluffy kind of advice, but I'm like, it is important. I do tend to see whether people like this or not. If people that tend to think negatively or I'm never going to get a job, never going to, and I see you, that's a self-fulfilling prophecy. Not only that, but I think that you have the right mindset too. This is something I tell people a lot. I'm like, don't come at the angle of give me a chance. Come at the angle of I'm here because you want me and you recognize that too. I've been on the other side of the hiring equation where I'm the manager and I'm looking for somebody. And you better believe if we're at the round 3, 4, or 5, we want that person. And they are in the position of power at that point. They have the leverage. And often people don't realize that, which is why they don't ask for raises, why they don't ask for more
Hmm.
money. I learned this lesson maybe 5 years into my career. That's really cool that you knew that off the bat. How did you get that mindset actually? Like, is this something that you got from a different discipline or what?
It's definitely from teaching, just being in the industry of teaching, a different career. And my first teaching job back in even in the States, it was like, I didn't want to negotiate at all. I didn't want to negotiate, but my mother was like, "You better negotiate. you have to tell them this number. They will not like fire you. They will not, you're not even hired. Like you have nothing to lose. Just ask them a number. All they can say is no, but they're not going to take the offer away. And if they do, then is that really a company that you want to work for? And so a lot of my mindset really comes from my parents, like really just instilling that kind of stuff into me, the positivity. I remember like early elementary school, like I would always be like a little bit timid or shy in like terms of raising my hand and asking questions. And my mom would be like, do you think do you think everybody else is smarter than you? Or do you think they just try harder than you? They probably just try harder. And so from there, I kind of realized like more effort you put in, then the reward would be better. I just never put the effort for homework.
That's some great advice you got at a young age. That's excellent advice. I'm glad you're sharing that here. Hopefully more people hear that and do whatever steps is necessary to maybe change a little bit about the way they think or perceive certain situations, whether it's in tech or whatever in life, on a deeper level.
Yeah.
You became software engineer. I just want to ask real briefly, what was one of the things that surprised you the most when you started working as a software engineer?
Some software engineers are divas a little bit. Like it really kind of threw me off a little bit. Kind of can be like a Shark Tank sometimes too. I always thought that I'm amongst people who have like, 20 years of experience, much more experience than me. And they say like, be honest if you don't know something. It's okay. Just be truthful. But you have to be wise with how you say certain things because not everybody has your best interests at heart. And that was something that I learned firsthand. Unfortunately, it wasn't the best experience of just me being vulnerable and then people leveraging that to, I'll say it like this. There's two ways to have the highest building. You can work really hard and build the highest building, or you could just destroy every other building. Unfortunately, some of the teams that I worked with, some developers are along the lines of destroy every other building in order to have mine as the highest. And so I didn't understand that because I come from an industry where I'm like, I want to help everybody grow and be the best version of themselves. And I'm thinking that's what, other people want too, but that's not always the case. There are really good engineering managers, senior developers, there are excellent ones. But at the same time, there are some that are just looking out for themselves. And that was a big shocker for me. More so than any coding project or anything like that. The code was, you're going to have problems. You're going to have to figure them out. It's part of the job. But the people part threw me off.
Wow, I'm sorry you had that experience. And unfortunately, that's not one we talk about a lot in the industry. I feel like people tend to think, okay, I got the job. Now I'm done.
Yeah.
It's like, no, that's just the start of a whole other ball game that now you're going to play. And this game is much longer, much more complex, and the stakes are actually higher now.
Yeah.
They're much higher. For every good team out there, every 10 good teams, let's say, there's one bad team. I've been on some not so great places, and it's shaken me emotionally, driven up my anxiety. I had awful experiences as well. And that sucks if that's your first one. I'll just be bluntly and brutally honest. There's a lot of money. And I think that also drives certain people to get in there that may have different interests. I like to code, and of course I like money as well. I'm not going to lie.
Of course.
But I've seen people, yeah, right. I mean, I don't like this idea out there that I've heard. If you're only coding for the money, that's terrible. I don't think that's right. I also don't think you can only code for money, but I think there's a healthy balance of both. I've never seen a person that's a good software engineer that just doesn't like to code, but I don't think that they're mutually exclusive at all.
I think that's an excellent point because I tell people that too. Like some people say like, oh, well, I don't want to just like, cause I'm talking to people who want to be developers every day. Right. And they're like, well, I don't want to just say it's just for the money or like, I don't want money to be the main motivation. I'm like, hey, like if you're making $30,000 a year now, and that is the number one reason, then that's the number one reason. Figure out the other reasons later. Like, if you want this to be a vehicle to you being able to take care of your family and move to a better neighborhood, whatever the case may be, then that is the reason. The money is the reason. Hey, let's not like sugarcoat it. Let's just call it out there. And then hopefully through this journey, you actually do enjoy coding because you will not get too far. You will not get far if you don't enjoy it. And that's with anything in life. If you don't enjoy it, you're not gonna stick with it.
Stack Overflow did a survey, and 70% of the coders they surveyed said that they code for a hobby as well as a profession. I've seen that on every job. I code if I made $1 million tomorrow, I would still be coding.
Yep.
I just like to write code. There's a 30% of them that don't. So I'd say there's a healthy amount of people that also don't find like intrinsically,
Yeah.
enjoyable. I don't think we ask car mechanics. We don't expect them to just be doing side projects
Oh,
in
your
their spare
changes
time.
on their spare time for
Yeah, right. Or
parts.
doctors to be like fixing,
Yeah,
podiatrists to be looking at feet in their spare time. So I don't know why there's this odd expectation that developers just
that's
love to
true.
code all the
That's
time.
that's
Yeah,
very true, actually.
it's a bit of an interesting expectation. So now you got into mentoring people to code, and I know that people that are listening are interested in what are the biggest mistakes you've seen people make when they're learning to code, and what ways have you seen people succeed?
The biggest mistake for me again is mindset. Like coming into it without the proper mindset. Maybe you're taking too lightly of it. You think it's just like, oh, once I join this program, I'm going to get everything that I need. I don't need to do anything external, or I don't even need to I can just do the bare minimum and I'm going to get a job. And I think no matter what the program is, even if you're going to Harvard, wherever, I mean, the name of Harvard alone is going to take you far. But if you just do bare minimum, you're going to get bare minimum results. And that might not necessarily be good enough to get a job. And so I think that's the biggest one. And then I hear this often like, oh, I'm not good at XYZ. Coming in with that mindset, like, oh, I'm not good at this. Like you mentioned earlier, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. Like, then you will not be good at it. It's your question should be, and I tell all of like my clients this, how can I be better at this? Or how can I achieve X result? I'm overwhelmed. Oh, and that's another one, being overwhelmed. Why are you overwhelmed? Overwhelmed, I learned this like a year ago or 2 years ago. Overwhelmed just means that there's a lack of priorities. Once you prioritize what it is that you need to do, then the feeling of overwhelm goes on the wayside, right? Because I know I need to do this and I need to do that and then I need to do this. The feeling of overwhelm, I have too many things that I need to do. Just organize them and just do 1, 2, 3, 4, and in that order, and don't think about anything else. Just achieve those goals. So for the beginners, that's really when they're coming into, I think, any type of program, mindset is by far the most important thing. And just, I would say just mindset for first and foremost. If you have that right, then you're on the right track. Because coding, I mean, the syntax.
Especially when you're a beginner, that's a lot of what you're learning to be barely hireable at that point.
Yeah.
That's really your biggest goal. I mean, even at Parsity, we teach quite a lot. We teach all the way up to like full stack authentication and stuff like that. It's still, you're barely hireable. The majority of the actual learning you're going to do is going to be in the job. And that's not going to stop for years. It's not going to ever stop, actually. It doesn't like, there's not a point where I'm like, okay, I know all of JavaScript now. I'm
Yeah.
done.
Yeah, exactly. I wish.
Yeah,
But
right. Like,
actually, I don't wish.
I agree with you. I don't wish. I'm glad that things change up a lot. It makes things interesting. Like now I'm learning Rust, or I mean, I'm still learning JavaScript 10 years later, and I'm still learning. I see these courses, learn JavaScript in 3 hours or 1 hour.
Oh
Like, man, I've been
gosh.
doing it all wrong. Been doing it for 10
Yeah.
years. Still suck at it.
It's so interesting because people will come to me and they're like, well, how many hours do I got to put in like on a weekly basis? And I'm like, it's so many factors.
It depends.
Like being in education for so long, I know that certain students pick up on things like quicker than
Mhm.
others. How much work that they put in also determines a lot of that. Your mindset going into it. So many factors. I can tell you how much work I'm going to give you, but I can't tell you
How long it'll take
I can't
you
tell you.
specifically to complete it,
Yeah, exactly. And then that's bare minimum of what I'm giving you.
right?
I'm telling you should go above and beyond. Like you should be building projects. You should be like taking this information, like kind of like when you're trying to learn how to drive, you got to get the knowledge first to get your
Mhm.
permit. And now you got to be behind the wheel and you need somebody with you while you're behind the wheel, helping you. That left was too wide. That right was
Right.
too sharp. Like we need to be
Yeah.
like, driving straight. And then eventually you don't need that person in the car with you anymore. You can drive yourself. And that's kind of like my approach or my philosophy in terms of education. It's like, I want to teach people how to learn for themselves.
Mhm.
A lot of the learning is going to be on the job, and some jobs might start up a new project with a whole new language.
Mhm.
Like, hey, we're gonna replace our WebSockets with Go, or we're gonna start doing this, and nobody knows Go, and now you got to start learning it, right? And now you got to build it, and so you got to figure out, how do I go about doing this?
I've
And
learned that
so,
on every single job I've ever had. I've come in there with like my base knowledge, which is exactly why I think people like you or Parsity or whatever, they help you get that technical foundation. And the ability to learn how to learn, super important,
So
because you're right.
important.
Like every job you're going to go to, they could just say, oh, now we're going to use this. You know how to code, right? You know the fundamentals of software, right? Well, cool. Well, then you should have no problem picking this new thing up now. Is it fair? I don't know, but it's just the way I've like worked every single. I went C#. I'm like, I know JavaScript. First job, C#. Cool, I knew C# now. Next job, Ruby.
gosh.
Oh, cool, no Ruby now. Next job, Elasticsearch. I'm like, oh man. And then I
But
get
it's
to this new
also
one, and it's like all CSS stuff. I'm like, oh, I suck at CSS. Here I am, 10 years of my career. I suck at CSS, and I'm like the senior guy on the team, and now I'm like a junior CSS person. Embarrassing.
but the cool thing, the thing about the companies, right, is like, hey, we're paying you.
Yeah.
Right. So
A
from
lot.
their perspective, right, it's just like, hey, you're getting paid. Like, I like to joke with some of my clients. It's like, hey, like, at one point you're just coding for food. Like, you're gonna be like, you don't know, you gotta learn it to be able to put food on the table, right? You
Mhm.
gotta keep progressing. And it's the beauty of it. I love jujitsu because of that too. Like, it's always like you're always learning something new. And coding is like there's always something changing. There's always a new framework on its way out that's gonna be more efficient than the previous one. It's cool. I love it.
Jiu-jitsu, that's a good segue into, well, first of all, that tells me a bit about maybe how you develop this discipline mindset between jiu-jitsu teaching. I can tell, and also the way you break down concepts. If you're not following him on Instagram, you should be. Now, does your jiu-jitsu background factor into your Instagram name, which you can share here?
Oh, it does actually. That's really funny. Yeah. So the name of the company is Dev Journey. I just like from martial arts, I did Taekwondo at a younger age and I do jujitsu now. And I wanted it to kind of like blend with who I am and in the process of like my journey as well. And so I just thought of like the knee, your actual knee, like a body part, right?
Mhm.
And so in jujitsu, there's knee bars. There's a whole bunch of like things you could do with somebody's knee to handicap them, I should say.
And there's a character that I particularly love that you do on your Instagram. Who is Bobby? Can you tell us a little bit about this character, Bobby? She is Bobby.
Yeah, Bobby, he is on his journey. He is trying to become a developer. He is trying to figure out what is the best way to navigate this path towards becoming this professional software engineer and actually getting paid. He has a lot of growth and development, that personal development that he needs to go through. But also it's kind of like a parody on, or just not necessarily parody, but just to bring levity to the situation of like looking for a job, looking for a program and not being so stressed out and boggled down with how life is just like beating everyone up, especially like today, these days in day and age. And so just to have somebody that maybe you see he's doing something foolish, but maybe you thought about doing that as well, but just not necessarily at the way that he's pursuing it. Or sometimes I feel like he's saying deep down what other people are believing. And, it's just a good way to be able to dispel some stuff. Cause I don't want to go like also and be super preachy and be like, you shall not do this. Right. And so it's just like, hey, like how can Bobby have a good time and also try to actually learn something? He learns some strings and stuff. So, but my niece absolutely loves him.
Oh, Bobby's an amazing character.
She just like took her mom phone and like scrolled through all my other content and just only binge watched the Bobby videos.
I mean, they're hilarious. And it's funny because like I've run into a few Bobbies. Bobby, by the way, is this character that David does, has like a high pitched voice, kind of a distorted face. It's on Instagram. You can check it out. And he asks these crazy questions during his interviews. He kind of does all this stuff that a developer should not do. And it's a great like character to remind you, like, here's what you generally shouldn't do. Right.
Yeah.
And I really like that a lot. And that's a really smart move because it doesn't come off preachy or anything like you shouldn't do this or that.
Yeah.
I tend to write more like that. I do really find the humor in that. And I've met a few in real life of the Bobby character, and I'm sure you have too.
Yes. Yeah.
I got a couple questions left for you. What is one of the trends you're seeing in the hiring market and that you're looking in at the moment in tech?
Leveraging AI, and this is something actually I seen you talk about as well. And I think you're like spot on with it. And it's not just necessarily, I think a lot of people are like, oh, AI is going to replace developers, so I shouldn't learn it. And like, I get those conversations sometimes too. And I'm like, have you ever used AI for writing code? Have you seen the mistakes that it makes and how it doesn't understand all the time what you're wanting to do? But leveraging it in a way to verify what like data inputs are. You can use it also to help assist you with some cybersecurity in case you don't really know too much about it. You know, you don't want anybody injecting any malicious type of code into your application, so you can have like a lot of your inputs verified through. And then also you can wrap, like you can use the open AI or whatever other ones, their APIs, and you can actually integrate an application based off of those. Those are becoming more and more popular, I think, nowadays. Just being able to leverage that and basically package around it within the framework of something like Next.js. I think Quick JS is starting to possibly catch on. It's the same developer who made Angular, and it's supposed to be much faster. The community is really small for that. So it's just like a lot of things that are coming out that I think are beneficial, but the most tried and true, I would say, is definitely Next.js, because according to the trends alone, like that is what 2024 is, at least 2024. But that and AI for sure, leveraging those two.
I feel you on that one. Yeah, I'm in complete agreement, that's one of the reasons, quick plug for Parsity. That's one of the reasons why we went from Create React app all the way into Next.js now. We're
Yep.
fully like transformed over because we just see that, yeah, Create React app is, people got so mad when I said this. I said, Create React app is dead. And people got really
Yeah.
mad. I mean, I'll let's be honest. It won't be used in any projects going forward for any company that's at all involved in the tech space.
The funny thing is, I was doing a workshop. I was like running a workshop on React and intro to React. And I'm telling everybody, like, hey, let's go to documentation. Let's look at it. And then in the documentation, it's like, hey, yeah, use Next. Yes. So yeah, create a React app is dead. Like even the
I don't know why
documentation
people
is
got so mad
telling
about it.
you.
Yeah, I'm gonna write that post again when I feel like making it spicy on the LinkedIn streets again. But yeah, it was really interesting. Any last words or advice for the audience, people trying to break into tech?
My advice would be, there's a couple things, but while you're looking for your journey, the most important thing I would say, besides mindset, because I mentioned that so much during this podcast, would be, what is your end goal? What is it that you want? What position it is that you want to be? I mentioned earlier that like, oh, I just started learning Python when I was in Korea, but I had no idea what I wanted to even do with Python. So it's kind of foolish. If I want to be a web developer, then I need to know, all right, I need to start focusing on HTML, CSS, JavaScript. That makes it less overwhelming. Okay, JavaScript is kicking my butt. I need help. Okay, who can help with JavaScript, right? Who can help me, or who's been where I've been that I vibe with? Whether it's a bootcamp instructor, whether it's a coach, a mentor, whether it's an online course, whatever it is, who can help me get to where I need to get to? And I understand, and that person is very similar to me. I think that's very, very important. So following that kind of process of knowing the end goal, if you're using a GPS, right? You just don't just start driving. The GPS is not just going to randomly give you routes. Only when you put in your end destination will it give you the three different options of how to get to where you want to go, right? And the same would be for learning your journey. And have some experience before you try to go to any program. Because a lot of people will just try to go to a program, don't know anything, and they invest, and you should invest. You shouldn't be thinking like, oh, I don't want to spend any money. It's your future that you're talking about. You should be serious about it. When you do that, you should at least know, like you mentioned earlier, you said like, hey, like I was in the boot camp. I knew most of the material. They filled in some holes. It should be like that. It should be like that. It's taking you to the next level, not taking you from zero somewhere. Unless you just are doing a beginner program and it's explicitly for beginners. And that's like a different focus. So mumbo jumbo there, but hopefully there's some value.
Oh no, absolutely. By the way, obviously I run Parsity. You have a program where you also mentor and coach developers. Highly recommend that. I think there's a lot of great programs out there, and I think the future of coding education is going to be in smaller,
Yeah.
more mentee and mentor focused relationships. And I see the bigger boot camps are failing because of this reason, because they are trying to capture people that have no
The
clue what they're
masses.
doing. And they saying, hey, pay us a lot of money and don't know any coding and we'll get you through. That is not, in my opinion, possible. I think you do have to
Yes.
have some of that initial knowledge base built up before you can go in. And those people tend to do very, very well. But anyway, where can people find you online?
You can definitely find me on Instagram. Obviously, I have a YouTube channel that I am growing currently. All of it is Dev Journey. All of it is under Dev Journey, and yeah, that's probably the best way to reach out to me. And if you're curious about any programs or whatever that I have, we do a 6-week challenge, and so you can look into that if you're curious about what that entails. Those links are also in my Instagram. I'll share them with you so you can put them like in the show notes if they're curious about that.
Yeah, this will all be in the show notes, by the way. Click on them, follow them on Instagram. Excellent person to follow, to work with. Yeah, highly recommended. Thank you so much for being on the show today. Really appreciate you being here.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
That'll do it for today's episode of the Develop Yourself podcast. To learn more about becoming a software engineer with us, then check out parsity.io. If you're not quite ready for that, then jump into our dev30.xyz program, which is 30 days of working on your mindset, habits, and JavaScript skills. Totally worth it. See you next week.